their silver rubles in a tin buried in the backyard. It's taken out of the economy. Yeah.
So what do you think, just at your opinion on some of this printing of money thing that's supposed to be coming out?
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
All right. Okay, first, that's a misnomer. It's not printing money, it's creating money. And the Fed is doing it drastically. The European Union wants to do it, but can't get away with it because there's not enough confidence in their money. It's what they're trying to do, and I mentioned it earlier, is they're trying to compensate for the decrease in V by increasing M. All right, M is the amount of actual money there is. V is take that money, and every time it changes hands. Every time I pay you $1, every time you pay somebody else $1, every time anybody buys anything, that's an increase in V. Right? You take money, you put it in the bank loans it to somebody else, they spend it, that's an increase in V. You take money, you put it in the bank doesn't loan it to anybody, that's not an increase in V. Right? 2008 happens, all of a sudden people realize that no, banks aren't the best way to handle money all the time. They can get silly and stupid. Everybody got scared, especially other banks, because they knew what those crazy people over at Morgan Stanley were doing. And said, I ain't loaning you jack. So money stopped moving, right? I can't remember the exact date, but it was in September of '08. There was a day that they broke the buck that the most conservative, safest funds were actually worth less at the end of the day than they'd been worth at the beginning of the day. And money froze. It didn't actually freeze. People were still buying things. But the big bankers that handled massive billion-dollar transactions on a daily basis stopped doing it. And that put us within that much of a depression that would have been worse than the Great Depression. Okay? So, two things happened after that. One, George Bush, who is not my favorite person.
You are from Texas.
Yeah, I am from Texas. George Bush is not my favorite person. Did probably the bravest political action I have ever seen in my life. He went totally against his base and actually did the right thing for the economy in spite of what it would cost him political and what it would cost his party politically. Mm-hmm. And arguably it cost him the election. But if he hadn't done it, we'd have been in a friggin' depression by the time the government had changed hands. What he did was the whole TARP, and it was handled lousily, granted, but if the TARP hadn't been done, and if especially, it was only partly the TARP, that was also partly, a big part, it was partly the Fed dropping interest rates to, here, you can have it, we're not charging interest this month.
All the way to zero.
All the way to zero. Yeah, any bank that was a member of the Fed could get as much money as it wanted from the Fed for no charge. And it still wasn't enough.
How do you become a bank that's a member of the Fed? I could use some of that money.
It is a loan.
It is a loan. You'd have to pay it back. You just don't have to pay any interest on it. And what they were trying to do is get the banks to
move money.
But the banks still weren't doing it.
No, they took money, they just didn't loan it out.
Right, because their balance sheets were so screwed. They had been playing fast and loose with the amount of reserve you're supposed to have, because in a few years before that, the restrictions on how much money a bank had to keep had gotten very loosened. So a lot of the banks, including Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, had like a 1% reserve, which meant for every dollar in that bank, they generated $100 of moving money. And when the money stopped moving, it went down. We lost 2/3 of the money in our economy in about a week. And we still haven't made it all up. We've made some of it up, and a lot of that made up money is the increase in M. That's what a lot of people, some of whom just don't know what they're talking about, and a lot of whom are being very disingenuous, are arguing is the radical liberals and it won't work. In the case of Ron Paul, I think it's that his political beliefs are so strong that he just can't see what's going on. But essentially what they're afraid of is that they believe that a lot of people deeply on a sort of religious basis, and talking economics to them is a little like talking orbital dynamics with a flat earther.
There's the quote of the weekend.
That was great.
It's not flat. Flat planets can orbit other flat planets.
But it has a sort of religious belief. They believe that in the invisible guiding hand. They believe that if you leave it alone, if you don't put too much money in the system, then the prices will adjust and the prices will go down and the economy will sort of magically right itself. And there's a certain amount of truth to that. It can happen that way, but it's a magical righting itself of a sailing ship, right? As long as the wave isn't too big, as long as the ship's pointed in the right direction, then the shape of the hull, it's going to magically right itself. Yeah, but it can also turn over.
Yeah. It has two stable states, this one and that one.
Don't.
It's chaos theory and you're absolutely right. Don't go into it.
You don't want me?
No.
I did not come here to be taught chaos math.
Well, it's not just that. He has the spreadsheet for the writing force of arbitrarily shaped holes.
No,
Don't
it's not
go
going to
there.
talk. I'm not going to go there. I'm not gonna go there. But I was going to
What does it mean
say.
from 1632?
No, what does it mean to us in 1632?
Okay.
What's it mean to us in 1632?
You said
Okay,
it.
what it means to us in 1632 is that a certain amount of predictions that I made about the bust in like 1640 are probably not going to happen in Grantville or the USC because the disconnect that I hadn't realized when I wrote those articles means that the perception of the money, of the uptimer money, and especially the Grantville money, the USC money, even diluted as it will be, is still probably going to be too strong for a monetary collapse, for an assumption that the dollar is going to collapse. You're not going to get a dollar collapse. What you're going to get is you're going to get a Spanish paper money collapse. You're going to get an Austrian Empire paper money collapse. Your Poland paper money collapse. You're not going to be able to use Russian money outside of Russia.
So what happens to the Allies?
It depends which allies.
Okay, the Danes. What's going to happen with the Danish money? Because they're almost by themselves anyway. So.
All right, it depends on how the Danes handle it. All right, a lot of this it's going to depend on who writes what.
Yeah.
The Danes, they're part of the Union of Kalmar, but they're not part of the USC. One thing that they will probably try to do when they run into economic trouble, which they will as soon as they start printing a lot of paper money, and you know
King Christian.
that King Christian is going to start printing paper money.
Because it's so cool.
Because it's so cool, and because he's broke, right? He just lost the last war. He's broke. He needs the money.
His wife spends a lot of money too.
So he's going to start printing it up, and it's going to go through the floor because it's King Christian's money. It's not uptimers' money. Then he's probably going to try and tie Danish money to American dollars. Okay, and That will not work unless he gets an agreement with the USE, which he's probably not gonna get.
Okay. Another one, France.
Well, wait a minute, before you go on with that, how can he not try to change the perception of things? Can he not try to?
He has to know about
bring
it.
in some
First he's gotta
uptimer that he can, as a prominent uptimer, who is either a
He can
real
try it.
expert or can serve as a figurehead to try to benefit from some of that same psychological
That's
effect.
almost exactly what we've got Wallenstein doing with
The
Roths.
Mrs.
Bohemia.
Roth. Yeah, who's, but yeah, you can
Marlon's
try
a
that, it might work. It's gonna depend on the writers. It's even looser than I always thought it was because of that disconnect. It's gonna be a public relations game. It's what you can convince people is worth money.
The other issue is that, you get sometimes into a situation, it's a little like, I don't have to be faster than the bear, I just have to be faster than the other person that's being chased. So if your money, even if your money and the economic system it's tied to is perceived as weak, if it's perceived as stronger than the most likely alternatives, you may not suffer that much.
Right, and that comes back to his question about France.
Okay, somebody who's not a dedicated part
Not
of
tied
it,
to the USC at all.
or
Right.
not as strongly.
France is probably, now it depends on how smart France is again.
Yeah.
But let us assume that Richelieu wins the argument for now. Richelieu is gonna go with paper money, but he's gonna go with gold and silver-backed paper money, and they'll give you silver on demand. They're simply gonna say, the French bank will give you silver on demand, because he knows he doesn't have the prestige. He's likely to realize he doesn't have the prestige. He may, if he tries to go with strictly paper money, it's gonna be worthless in a month. Well, no, in a year.
So is he gonna be able to get any backing out of owning North America now?
He might.
Okay.
He knows where California is. If he says, all right, here's a scenario.
It's a long ways away, yeah.
Yeah, the gold-
Yeah,
Keep
but-
in mind,
but
the
that almost
developing
doesn't
things that
matter.
are gonna happen in France anyway.
It's
so.
perception, not reality.
Good point.
I bought America. California's in America. There's the California goldfield. There's the
There's the Arkansas Diamonds.
There's
We're
the
gonna have
Florida
the
goldfield.
49ers, yes.
Yes.
They're
we're gonna have
listed.
the Franco-Nipponese
There's the
War.
Florida goldfields listed in the encyclopedia that we got a copy of.
Well, there's the real Goldfield, Dahlonega, Georgia, that's listed.
Yeah, let's not forget Canadian diamonds and Canadian gold. Okay,
Right.
fine. So that's
If he
fine.
can
So that's
sell
a
it.
possibility play for
That was
France,
the original,
okay?
there's gold in
Now-
our hills.
England is in a
Well,
worse
let's not,
situation.
I wanna go someplace before we go to England.
Okay.
Okay? I wanna talk about the East for just a minute.
Okay.
Because there's at least a minor play started with, you had to introduce a money called the Becky. I mean, give me a break, okay? And so there's at least a minor play going on where we have a fiat currency with no government issuing it.
Well, actually, we got two of them.
Talk to me.
The army stuff.
The Viennese
That's the
waltz.
Becky's.
In Viennese waltz.
Remember that it's the girls from